let us dive straight into our first panel today, Access Now and Access Tomorrow. He's already been mentioned. I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Hosams Meri, Minister of Health in the Republic of Latvia, and Monica Shaw, Senior Vice President and Head of European Markets at BMS. A very warm welcome to both of you. I should mention, ladies and gentlemen, that Joelle Nelson, an award-winning patient advocate, had planned to be with us and had to cancel yesterday due to ill health. We are very sorry not to have him. We wanted to start because, as Natalie said at the beginning, it's all about the patient at the centre. So I'm going to ask those of you in the room who are patient advocates, when I come out to you with the mic, or if you prefer in writing, if you would please join our conversation and make sure that we hear that patient voice. And we wish Joelle very good wishes and a swift recovery. So Minister, if I could come to you, Hans there talking about new and bold approaches. For you, is it a case of, do you believe we're actually on the right track? I mean, the goal of the pharmaceutical legislation was to increase patient access right across Europe. Are we on the right track and we just need to do more of it, or do we need to think in a different way?
Thank you very much for inviting me, first of all. I'm really very happy to be here. And I think that we are on the right track, but it doesn't mean we are doing best things right now. So, you know, I represent a small countries, the smallest countries in Europe. They are like 10 countries. So the Baltic states, the Slovenia, Slovakia, Cyprus, Malta, and so on and so on. And so when we are meeting in each meeting in EU, I mean, in Brussels or somewhere else, in Denmark, when we had the last 53 countries meeting and we elected the director, we were talking about how we could help our patients. So Director Kluge mentioned that the main issue what to do is to get a right policy, and you need to be enough to encourage yourself and to encourage your people. And first of all, you have to get a brave politician who can take a decision and move forward in spite of all difficulties, and in spite the fight what he's going to find also with the industry itself. So I had my own fight actually last year with the industry, but it doesn't mean that we are not working together and we are not united to go forward on the right track in order to get an accessible medicine for the people of Europe. Everywhere they are. They live in Germany, they live in Slovenia, or they live in Riga. So this is the main task for the politician who is brave, who has a will to change something in the future. If we want to change something, we have to sit all together, the industry, all the stakeholders, the policymakers, the patient organization, and work together to find the right solution.
Thank you. And talking of that bravery, and Natalie appealed to us today to talk honestly about the challenges and the conversation, the tough conversations you have with industry. What for you are the most important issues if we're really going to address this access issue and get it right? What for you, not the solutions yet, but what are the most important issues we need to address? I mean, if you look at, for example, so with different elements to access, there's elements relating to innovation and getting those innovations approved, getting them to market, getting them to the patients. There are issues relating to access to clinical trials. There are all sorts of issues that need to be addressed. What for you are the most crucial ones that we need to focus on?
We need to focus on bureaucracy. We have to facilitate all the regulation, because, you know, the most difficult problem what we have in Europe and the member states in general, from time to time we establish a new regulation, and we're getting, you know, harder and harder. And then at the moment we need to get a solution, we find that we made all this restriction for ourselves. So first of all is bureaucracy. I mean, we need to simplify all the demands, what we ask, for example, for registration in new medicine in a country like Riga, for example, like Latvia. So we have to work to decrease this bureaucracy, first of all. Then we have to work on so-called sustainable health economy. And we have a deficit of experts, I believe, in Europe in general, when we are talking about health economy. And right now, if Dr. Kluge mentioned the 14% of people, they move to the poverty level because of they cannot afford to get the safe life medicine. And this is what we were working in the last year in Latvia, that we recognized then that our people in Latvia, they are paying like 20 till 40% an additional money to buy a certain medicine. If I compare this medicine price, for example, Riga, Vilnius, Tallinn, and if I'm comparing to Warsaw, so I see there is a different price. So first of all, we have to work on this so-called, the secret price. What we are facing, that the industry are working to keep it as a very important issue in the future in the negotiation on the pharmaceutical package. So it's also a very important question to talk about that. Is it possible to change something? Or because, when I'm asking, when I have, for instance, I have two patients with a specific rare disease, and the special treatment, it can cost a government, as a minister, I have to accept, to pay 500,000 for one medicine for one patient. So if I'm comparing when we're having negotiation, and then I compare this price, for example, in Latvia and in Lithuania and in Poland, I see there is a huge difference. So it means that I'm not going to support this patient. Because I'm not have enough funds.
Let me come back on this.
And the price is enough high not to be involved in the negotiation for
I want to come in on this issue, and in fact, we have a question which sort of links that, but we'll pick it up later on. But one of the challenges, says the questioner, for smaller companies is the fact that the EU consists of 27 member states with different health systems and different requirements. Could you imagine a harmonized approach, for example, among the Baltic states? We will come back on that. But Monica, your sense of where we are, and if we are broadly headed in the right direction, or we really do need to think about this differently, and how you see the challenge. What for you are the key things we need to talk about?
Yeah, no, thank you very much for the invitation to be here today. And I'm here in my capacity of Head of Region Europe for BMS. But like many of us, I wear multiple hats. So like my colleague, I'm also an ex-physician working in the National Health Service in the UK. And I'm also, like many people, a relative of somebody who was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, my father. And so I would start off from a position of hope that I think those multiple hats we all wear mean we come from a position of having very common goals. We all want health equity. We all want to have treatments available for all patients across Europe. And secondly, I think we are at a time where scientific innovation has been stronger than it ever has before. We're seeing some amazing treatments come to life. Oncology, my father had multiple myeloma. This is a space now where we have cell and gene therapies coming through. It's a really exciting time for scientific innovation. And thirdly, I think we're actually all pretty aligned on the diagnostic, as in what is the issue that we're trying to solve for. We all agree that there is inequity, not just, by the way, in smaller member states, but we talked about Belgium. Coming from the NHS, I've been in a position of having to tell a patient that they can't get access to a treatment. We have clear data to show that time to access to medicines varies substantially across the EU, and that the average is a year, which is a long time to wait if you have a serious disease such as cancer. Having said all that, I think what worries me is that when you start to talk about specific medicines and costs of medicines, this can very rapidly lead to a zero-sum game because it takes you down a cost containment route. And you said, which problem are we trying to solve? Access, clinical trials. These are all deeply interlinked. It's an ecosystem that we have to create. And I think this is what the Draghi report highlighted so well, is that we need to work together to create this space as a competitive advantage. And this is where we see true growth, true access, true sustained innovation through clinical trials and R&D investment. So I think that is the path forward. We heard a lot today about working in collaboration, but now's the time to move from that diagnosis where we all agree to what are some tangible solutions that we can provide.
And that's where the conversation gets more difficult. Just drilling down a little bit in terms of the root causes of some of these delays. I know there is an industry-led initiative, the European Access Hurdles Portal. What does that tell us about what is causing the delays, particularly in relation to pricing and reimbursement, which I think was the focus?
Yes, and what we see, so just to sort of go back to basics, what happens when you provide a new medicine is you put it through the regulatory system, it gets approved, and then you do need to file in each member state, and then that time between the filing of each member state and eventual reimbursement. And actually what we see is that 70% of the delay happens in that time after filing, so after the company has filed and before the product is reimbursed. We've talked about will the pharma legislation, and I think this is what it was designed to address, is this equity and access. However, we can't detach it from the broader ecosystem. We have to look at the whole. We have to look at the R&D investment. We have to look at the clinical trials portfolio. And this is where the Draghi report was interesting, because we need to create a little bit of a burning platform when it comes to how we play globally. If you look back 20 years, we were a little bit behind. We were maybe 2 billion behind the US. That gap is enormous now. We're now 20 billion of investment behind the US. We've slipped below clinical trials, below China. That's 60,000 slots. That's 60,000 treatment options that patients are being denied from the clinical perspective. So we need to address this ecosystem as a whole and make sure that we link everything together to create Europe an attractive place for investment, and this will help access.
So, Minister, talking there about one aspect of those delays that the portal has been addressing, but somebody in our audience also raising the question of approvals and how much longer it takes in the EU as compared with other parts of the world, most notably the US. For you, what do you see as the key reasons behind those delays, and is there something we can do in that area? Is it that you pointed to the bureaucracy, but is it also a resource issue, for example, the European Medicines Agency? And that question about harmonising the approach, can we do more to work together and thereby speed things up between different member states?
Yeah, so I think, yes, we can do more, because if, for instance, if we got a medicine registered in Latvia or somewhere else in Europe, so why would we need to go again the same way and to repeat all this process in the EU agency? So we can a little bit try to find common points where what we can decrease the time and the inspection time and so on and so on. So if we are in one union, so we have to find out the common point, how to move forward. Right now we have 27 markets, 27 countries, and 27 agencies.
So that question from our audience about whether it would be possible, whether you think it would be possible to imagine, going back to our theme today, a more harmonised approach, for instance, starting with the 3 Baltic states. Of course, this is an area where EU member states guard their competences, their right to decide over health very fiercely. But do you see an avenue for more harmonised approaches, and how much difference could that make to tackling all these issues we're addressing?
Yeah, I think that we can start with the Baltic states, we can start with the 10 small countries in EU together just to move forward. We had such initiative came from Cyprus, from Minister of Health from Cyprus, and we're working on that actually, because I believe that we can move quicker if we start like with small groups. Otherwise, if we will wait for all the picture to be full, so it will take us a little bit longer time. Not a little bit, maybe even some years, you know.
Thank you. And Monica, you mentioned clinical trials and those 60,000 patients who are not getting access to innovative treatments. I mean, when we come to this question of harmonisation, we are about to see the health technology regulation come into force. It's going to be applied in advanced therapies in January. Joint assessment of clinical trials begins. Do you see that as a crucial turning point? And do you think it will deliver, or is there a risk that it may not actually achieve the desired result? Is that the sort of area we should be focusing on, do you think?
I think the opportunity we have of Europe is to leverage the scale of Europe. And Natalie talked very much about, where have we come from in the last 25 years. I think we need to focus on what are the opportunities for the future. And then how do we do that with the least bureaucracy? And how do we utilize this as a competitive advantage, not a competitive disadvantage? When we start just with the EU legislation, to reinforce the RDP, we know this is something that protecting intellectual property ensures investment into us as an EU. And then if you move on to EU HTA, I think this is a space where, again, we need to make sure that the ambition and the practical realities match up, that this doesn't become an additional bureaucratic hurdle, but really does become an enabler, particularly for markets that have less resource, to access innovation more quickly. So I think I go back to the message of hope that we're on the same page in terms of goals. I think we have a clear diagnostic, but the need to work together to make those solutions tangible and practical is more acute now than it ever was before, and that means everybody coming to the table together.
I want to come to an issue. We've talked a lot about innovation and developing innovative medicines and therapies. We haven't talked so much about the making of them and keeping them in Europe. But before we do that, I don't want to just privilege those who write their questions. Anybody in the room want to join our discussion? As I said, I'd be particularly delighted to hear from anyone representing a patient organisation. Can I lure any of you into the discussion at this point? You see, the lights are on you now. No pressure, no pressure. Or for the moment, are you preferring to write your questions? It looks to me like for now, you prefer that I read them, but I will give you another opportunity. Sorry, did you say you saw one?
I
No?
mentioned something, but
Please,
I'm sorry.
no, Minister, dive in.
I believe that we have to encourage them a little bit.
I give them a couple of goes. We need to warm them up. I wanted, as I say, to come to this issue of manufacturing. Because a lot of the focus has been on, we have the great ideas. The challenge in Europe is turning those ideas into products and treatments and then getting them to the patients. But how important is it when addressing the access issue that these products are not only born in Europe, as it were, but they're also made here? We've seen the EU's initiative on biotechnology manufacturing. So how important, Minister, do you think that is as part of this holistic equation that we're trying to assemble?
I think that the pharmaceutical sector in Europe is a great sector, first of all. And we should, as a politician, I'm talking, of course, as a politician right now. And I believe that investment in pharma is very important, because if we would like to have a positive impact on the EU economy, so we need much more export. And the pharmacy and the pharma in Europe are already enough to do a lot of innovation, medicine, and then to go forward for a better and for much more, better products. And right now we feel some stagnation. And the stagnation not because of EU economy in general, but I believe that the impact of the geopolitical situation in our part, in the part of, the eastern part of Europe, and the aggression of Russia against Ukraine, and all these political issues, they had a great, a big pressure and impact on the economy of EU. And at the same time on in general, on the industry itself. And so I can give many examples that we have two manufacturers in Latvia, and they had a lot of cooperation, trade collaboration also with the eastern part of Europe. And after the war, so they had some difficulties for investment and to improve their, own production. So we are in a very critical period right now in the history of Europe, and we have to decide further where to invest and how to be independent. And we don't have to isolate Europe, but we should be enough ready for any geopolitical challenges. And the health system is part of the national security for each member state and for EU in general.
So and I will ask you later on what you hope for from the life sciences strategy, but also the economic security strategy. We talked in the previous mandate, Commission mandate, we tend to talk about strategic autonomy. Now we're talking about economic security. You see this issue as very much part of that equation. I have a couple of questions about shortages and stockpiling I'll come back to in a minute. But Monica, in terms of those decisions on where to manufacture, what drives your company and other companies in making those decisions, and what can Europe do to make it more attractive to not only, do the research, do the development, but also manufacture in Europe?
I think it's exactly what you're saying, that we can't isolate one bit. As a pharmaceutical company, we look at the full ecosystem, and we want to have presence in markets where we can run our studies, manufacture our product, and then have patients actually access our medicines. If any part of that is broken, it makes it very hard for the ecosystem as a whole to operate. I mean, I can take a BMS example. One of the areas that we play is in advanced medical therapies, so things like cell and gene therapies, amazing advance for patients. In lymphoma, 1 out of 2 people are actually cured. We are building a facility of manufacturing in Leiden in Netherlands, and this is a decision that has to be made in advance. But we're seeing that ATMPs are a challenge in Europe. We now only have 10% of clinical studies for advanced medical therapies happening in Europe. And this is a space where, and Draghi highlighted this as well, where we could really have a competitive advantage as Europe. But it goes back to not fixing one bit, or I think we mentioned it, putting pressure on one side, thinking that we'll solve the problem on the other side, and looking at how we can operate as Europe as a whole to create an ecosystem that is a win-win.
Minister, can I come back to an issue? So we talk about developing what we need to do to create the innovative environment, to have the competitive edge and so on. And then what we're not talking about so much is then healthcare systems and their capacity to adapt, to absorb the systems, and indeed the pressure this may put. Because we have a question from the audience saying, are the efforts from regulators in the pharma industry to provide access to new oncology and advanced therapies leading to unsustainable pressure on national health systems? How to tackle the ever-increasing public spending on new medicines? This goes to the heart of the dilemma that politicians and those doing the assessments face every day. How do we get that right? How do we square that circle? Because a tragedy if we can't take advantage of the innovations that are out there.
We are facing 2 major problems in Europe. First of all, we are getting aging. I mean, very elderly Europe. So we are living longer, and so we need to spend on our health much more money than before, because we live 80, 90 years with, multiple chronic diseases together. And the second problem, we have shortage of the medical personnel. So we have problem with doctors, with nurses, and we have some internal immigration from one country to another country, from the eastern part of Europe to the Nordic region, from the Nordic to the central of Europe, and from the United Kingdom to the United States, and so on. And this is very important, actually. And we for example, in the last 5 years, we increased our public health budget almost for 600-700 million euro for a small country. It's enough. It's enough sum. And we were trying to increase also the pressure on the industry to cooperate and to get better prices and so on and so on. But we recognize that we have to change the model of pricing. And so we established a new model of pricing for prescription medicines. And we hope that from 1st January 2025, we'll get, I believe that the medicine in Latvia will be affordable for the Latvian population, Latvian people. They will pay less, 15-20%, comparing to 2024. So the second positive point what we've done in the government, that we also increasing every year at least for 15%, the public fund on the reimbursable medicine and so on.
And that links to a couple of questions, one relating to precisely healthcare system readiness and variety. So when we talk about more equitable access across Europe, a questioner asking, to what extent do you think governments are willing to sort of recognise that this is a capacity issue as well, a capabilities issue, as well as affordability, that if you don't have the capacities, then some health systems will not be able to take these things up?
Yeah, it is. It is also a capacity problem, and we should admit that there is a problem on this, and we cannot ignore that everything is okay and the problem is only money, so let's be very honest.
And I'm wondering there whether there's a role for the EU minister in terms of supporting member states in identifying what they need to do and where the gaps, capacity gaps are.
Yeah, because I believe that in each member state we have a little bit different problems. Because the small countries have a little bit different problem from, for example, from Germany or France and so on. So we have to identify each country, its own problems, and we have to go forward to find the right solution.
Can I just also ask about the role of the patients in all of this? Because we have a question from the audience saying, Monica, the engagement of patient advocates is essential, but their capacity, we go back to that, is not a given. How do you think the engagement of patient advocates into development and access to new solutions can be supported? And whose responsibility is it?
Yeah, I think this is a hugely important topic. I mentioned my father had multiple myeloma. Now I'm somebody who's a doctor. I was working in the industry, and I still found it pretty much impossible to navigate how to get access for my father for treatment. And if I'm having that kind of struggle, to have a patient self-advocate at a time where they've got so much to deal with, for me, it's just unimaginable. So that voice and leveraging the scale that we see in patient advocacy now is more important than ever. And at least what I'm seeing now is a trend to more partnership work, to more understanding how to navigate these political environments, and for patients embracing their voice at all levels. So we need to have diverse representation in clinical studies. We need to make sure that we have personalized medicine, and we need to make sure that the patient voice in terms of what's value for them is also recognized in the access discussion. So what patients may value might not necessarily be what a government puts value on. So that patient voice is extremely important, and we are seeing more and more work being done in this space. And as I say, what makes me hopeful is the fact that it's more educated voice rather than just pure financial transactions, but more partnership working, more collaboration with a common goal inside.
Minister, to the role of the patients and whose responsibility is it to make sure that the patients are very much part of this conversation and this cooperation and collaboration? Is it the job of industry to support them? Do you see a role for government, for yourselves in this?
I think it's also government function, of course.
And how best to support that, do you think?
I think that we should just sit all together and keep talking. It's dialogue. What else?
So another aspect when we're talking about access, and it's a question for you, Minister, is there any news, asked the questioner, on the joint stockpiling of medicines announced by the 3 Baltic states some weeks ago? And in more general terms, what are your views on stockpiling? And Monica, I'd like to also ask you, we have the promise of a Critical Medicines Act to precisely address the issues of shortages, and one of our audience says, have we got any innovative ideas for how we address that problem? But Minister, on stockpiling generally and the joint initiative that you've...
Yeah, we had already some months ago signed an agreement, the 3 countries, a memorandum actually, not an agreement, to work together on this, because we have a common border with Russia, and we have to be ready for any military maybe conflict in the future, so we have to be ready, and we are working on the so-called critical medicine list. And we already, for the next 4 years, we have reserved a special budget for buying all these so-called material reserve for the country. And that I believe that Lithuania and Estonia and Latvia, we are living in the same region, so we have the same challenges, and we can work together further on to get a better stockpiling and prices, and we have all the so-called national security issues. This stockpiling issue is a national security issue.
Indeed. Monica, any thoughts on this? And then I'll give you another opportunity. And then I would like to focus the last few minutes of our conversation on the life sciences strategy and what we hope for. But Monica.
So I think COVID highlighted this as a clear issue, and I think this is another problem that we need to solve together, because the risk is that some countries stockpile and that leads to shortages elsewhere. So I think this is definitely a problem that we need to solve as a community to make sure there's equitable access even in times of crisis, and all working to navigate what we know is a very complex geopolitical world.
Any questions from all of you? I won't ask them to shine the spot. Ah, there it goes. Because we do have a very interesting question, and it links to, I want to ask you what you would hope for, or what you expect, indeed, from the promised new European Life Sciences Strategy. And linked to that, a questioner says, when recently in China, I heard the view that Europe wasn't seen as a serious competitor for life sciences innovation, but as a good market for products. How should we account for this view, and what, if anything, should we do about it? So if we are to take that leadership, we say we have the skills, we have the talent, we have the research institutions, we have so many assets to be a life sciences leader, but a suggestion there, that's not how the rest of the world sees us now. So if the rest of the world is to see us in that role, and we are to truly be world leaders, what do you hope for? And perhaps, Monica, to you from an industry perspective, what do you hope for from the new strategy? Where do you think the focus should be? And then, Minister, the same thought from you.
Yeah, so I have a heavy European bias. I want Europe to be successful. I think you're right. I think we have some of the best core ingredients. We still have some of the best basic science. We still have some of the best researchers, the best clinical treaters across the world. But we need to leverage the European scale to really make sure that we have that global presence. I think it's been said many times today, we have a really clear view on the diagnostic. The Draghi report was an incredible summary of where we stand today and the opportunity that we have for the future. But we need to work together, and by together I mean with commitments also from the industry side. We've committed to transparency around where the issues are so that we can both get to the table and really work these problems out together. So I think we acknowledge that there is more to do, but there are the ingredients for hope for the future.
Minister.
I think we have to establish so-called United AU Innovation Hub, because I believe that to work alone, I mean, individually, will never approach any level of innovation and life science and so on. And I believe that we're also facing a problem with the capacity, and so we need to work on a good health approach system. First of all, we have to be healthy to produce something. So let's work, I mean, on two sides. Prevention, a good health for all European people, a capacity, investment in pharma, and a united innovation AU hub. It would be the best.
Sounds good.
Yeah, exactly.
Coming back, so we sort of broadened out, but now because, as we said earlier, this access question is so complex and multifaceted. Coming back now to where we need to go, and coming back, so we heard the theme of today is about imaginating. Imaginating? New word I've just invented. Imagining that healthier, more competitive Europe. When it comes to access now to the medicines and treatments already available, and access tomorrow to those innovations, those pipeline innovations that we saw displayed on the screen and Natalie talked about. If each of you had to identify a key priority, and I'd like to make this one priority for yourself as a politician or policymaker, and one for the industry itself. If we are to tackle these, now you're going to say to me, well, I can't identify one priority because we've said it's ecosystem, it's holistic. So maybe if I put it a slightly different way, we started by saying, imagining is not enough, let's act. What's the key next step we need to take if we are to address all these issues effectively? Minister first, and then Monica.
Bureaucracy, I mentioned before today.
That's where we start.
Yeah, of course. This is our biggest problem, actually, in EU. Not only, I mean, in EU as a commission, I mean, in each member state. And we already have changed a lot of regulation in our system just to facilitate and simplify the process. I mean, if you are speaking about access tomorrow, but at the same time, for a small country, we have a lot of challenges we are facing in the future because the market is small. So we have to keep working together with the industry to get our right medicine in the right time.
Thank you very much. Monica.
So on our side, I think we've started with a portal. We're committed to really understanding the challenges around access and how we can improve. And I think the ask would be to pull through the pharma legislation that's coming through at the moment to make sure that we at least maintain our status quo, and then leverage things like the life sciences strategy to make sure that we create Europe as an innovation hub moving forward.
And on that note, will you join me in thanking the Minister and Monica very much indeed for a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.